All right, dudes, welcome back. We've got the note sheet open today, and I wanted to get this out before the contest ended. I've got more Monero content coming, I promise. And I know I've been talking about Zano an inordinate amount lately, but the cool thing about Zano is that it's like an ecosystem. And so it's not just money, there are like more things that you can come up and get creative with. And so they're doing a competition right now. It's called Build Back with Zano, Build Back Better with Zano. Let me just make sure I have this right. It goes to the 26th of October. So checking my watch, the fact that it was what, the 22nd. Yeah, I had to get this down. So let me just check what the name is. Zano. I believe it's called the Build Back Better with Zano. Build with Zano. Okay. So yeah, I wanted to make sure that I got this out there. Um, Next time I'll do a PowerPoint presentation if it like, has some like interest in it. I just want to say to begin that I don't have any insight into the regulatory or legal ramifications of this project. I did a video a while ago called Private Capital Markets with Zano or something like that. It's on the channel. But somebody had commented and said, maybe we shouldn't edge too much into this domain quite yet because, you're talking about issuing stock tokens and private bonds on top of the Zano blockchain. And who knows if that's going to catch the eye of some regulator because we're dealing with things that could be considered securities and things like that. So I don't know what the ramifications of any of this are. I just want to say that to begin. But nevertheless, we're experimenting with ideas that could be done with the Zano blockchain. And I think that this is an interesting one. So, this is called the Zano Tank, which is kind of like Shark Tank, but with Zano. And essentially, what we're trying to do with this is create a nexus where anonymous entrepreneurs and investors can come together to build private business empires. So that's kind of cool, right? And so essentially, this would be a way for prospective entrepreneurs, business owners, and builders to get private capital from private investors. And, you know, because you're dealing with anonymity and because you're dealing with money, there is a risk that there may not be accountability, right? And so I want to go through some of this stuff just to, because what we want to do is we want to optimize privacy, but also optimize accountability so that you can optimize the entire system. And typically, the less anonymity you have, the more responsibility there is for the person who is kind of doxxed and the person who has their reputation on the line. And, we see that with the Zano team in general. The Zano team is doxxed. You could look at who is developing the Zano blockchain. And so, to a certain degree, it's a little bit more of a trusted blockchain because there's going to be more consequence to them if it doesn't work. Right now, they say it's all experimental, and they are very honest in their interviews regarding what they're doing with the blockchain, the limitations, and what projects are out there that are doing similar type things that other people may want to check out. They're very transparent. But at the end of the day, because they're not private, they do have some like stake in the project. And so, in that way, there's a little bit more of a reputable factor to Zano, which I like. And, because we're dealing with private capital, it's sort of the question of how do we make it so that people don't run away with the money, right? And how do we make a private capital market work? How do we make a private investor entrepreneur nexus successful? And so I'm going to go through some ideas with this, and it's going to link a little bit into what we talked about with Zano Capital Markets because we're going to be talking about private stock tokens, maybe private bond issuance on top of Zano and that kind of thing. Um, so to move on, so this is the idea essentially. So let's say that you have an app or something like that. And it's like maybe kind of like a social media app. It's sort of like a Craigslist in a way, but for entrepreneurs and for investors. and it would be totally anonymous. Okay. And entrepreneurs who want to raise capital, what they do is they establish a page, and that page is associated with their alias. Because on Zano, what you can do is you can purchase an alias. It's sort of like an NFT, and that alias is similar to your Twitter handle online. You've got the at, and then you've got your name, and it's similar in Zano. You've got the at, you've got your name, and these things can actually be traded, right? So if you get in early and you create names that are catchy or names that represent big things and whatever, maybe you could sell that alias in the future for a lot of money to somebody who wants that thing, right? And so it's a really cool feature of the Zeno blockchain. And so aliases could also be attached to reputation, and it makes it easier for maybe online private social media companies to be established. It makes it easy for private markets to be established because people's wallets would be associated with their aliases. And it would be much more easy to associate different accounts with their financial address, right? It's convenient. And so what entrepreneurs would do is they would get their alias that would represent them and their company, and they'd make a page. And so on this page, they would have their name, they would have what their business is doing, and they would have all of this information that is totally optional for them to put. Now, the more information, the better. And let me just go through some of these ideas. They would have their business plan and projections. They would have perhaps a video presentation of the business and the operation logistics, kind of like what you would have on Shark Tank, right? Somebody goes into the Shark Tank, they give a presentation, they have their PowerPoint, they have their billboards or whatever, and maybe they have the product, and maybe they have market research on that product, and they went out there to test the product and get consumer responses, and maybe those responses are recorded somewhere by a third party so as to give credence to the responses and stuff like that. They would ideally have financial statements, because obviously sharks, they look for financial statements. They want to know how much money you're making. They want to know their asset turnover ratio, the return on investment, equity, whatever, all that stuff. They want to do the analysis on the numbers to see if this is a good investment. Now, the question, of course, is, well, if you're giving a private entrepreneur who you don't know the name of your money, well, how can you make sure that they're not going to, upload fraudulent financial statements? Well, the solution to that would be to get a reputable CPA firm to provide assurance on the statements. Okay. So they would have to pay for this service to happen. So similar to where you're going to invest in a public market company, on a public exchange like the New York Stock Exchange or the NASDAQ or whatever, all of these companies have audited financial statements, right? Now, what's funny about that is if you actually look into the data, the PCAOB, which is the Public Company Accounting Oversight Board, who looks over at all of the firms who are doing public audits, they put out reports that say like half of the audits out there actually don't have good backup to their audit opinions, which is like, all right, do we have enough backup to say that this is a statement that reasonably doesn't have fraud and like misstatements and stuff like that, material misstatements? And half of the audits done don't have enough backup for their opinions. Isn't that crazy? But ideally, for a private company in this kind of situation, you get some firm, some reputable CPA firm that has like a Google review page or has some kind of reputation to provide assurance to these financial statements. Okay. And presumably this company would maybe, I guess, leave out the name of the guy running the firm. I mean, I don't know how somebody actually gets private with this. Again, if a person could provide credence to their project without doxing themselves, go ahead. At some point, I think you're probably going to have to give a little bit of information that may lead to some information as to who you are. Again, if you can get away with not doing that, then fine. Maybe you get private investors who to give you capital, and then you develop a reputation with your alias online, And as you start to pay dividends, or you start to pay your investors back who are in the Zano community, you develop a reputation. You actually don't have to do any of this stuff because you're giving dividends out, and people are just excited to buy some yielding stock token. But all this stuff can be figured out by the market. But that's an idea. You have your proof of concept. You have any contact information on the page, and information on their stock token and how to purchase, upcoming dividends, what the dividend yield is, and all that stuff. Personal identification if desired. Okay. Now, ideally, it's as anonymous as possible, but these are all ideas of things that entrepreneurs could put on their page in order to try to attract capital from prospective investors. And I think I meant to put, yeah. So entrepreneurs will need to find a way to build a reputation. They can send out sample products to prospective investors. They can create a YouTube channel. They can get other alias people with good reputation in the industry or good reputation on the Zano Tank to vouch for them if they know them. But of course, you want to look out for that, because what if these people with good reputations, just want to get a payout before they ditch everybody, and then they get a payout from this entrepreneur, and then they're out, and then they scam a whole bunch of people. So, there's got to be corrective ways in order to try to filter out fraud and scams. And I think all that will be determined by the market. But these are just a few ideas. And then you have investors who create a page on the Zano Tank as well. Okay, so they want to invest their Zano, right, to earn private yield. That's why they're there. And it's also a way to try to build a network of people who accept Zano for whatever business that they're running. Presumably, if you're trying to raise Zano capital, then you yourself would accept Zano and Monero for whatever business that you're trying to run. And this would incentivize people to, invest in your business and, encourage the support and growth of the network. And so I think that is also a point. So the investor would post information about their skills and expertise, which would assist in prospective entrepreneurs and whatever it is that they're trying to do. So that would allow for prospective entrepreneurs to see whether or not the investor could actually work with them in order to build the company. At that point, things would probably be doxed, or at least that prospective investor could give some connects with people that they know to that person, and they could help in whatever way they could establish a relationship. So the investor would post on their page the desired type of business that they want to invest in, because maybe they know those businesses better. They know how to better read the financial statements. Maybe they have connections with certain industries, and so they could use their connections in order to assist in that, prospective entrepreneur growing their business and, growing their Zano business as well. Because a lot of this is meant to grow the Zano ecosystem and the private cryptocurrency circular economy. Ultimately, at the end of the day, it's what we want to do. And any information necessary to attract attention from prospective entrepreneurs, right? Because you have to remember, the investors are going to be competing as well. They want to get into good companies early on so that they can get good yield on their private cryptocurrency. And presumably in this kind of environment, the rate of return is going to be higher than it would be in other areas, because you're dealing with private capital, and your cost of entry into this market is going to be lower than a totally regulated market. And so where you've got to pay third parties, this is peer to peer. That's the benefit. It's peer to peer. It's private. And so you don't have to pay third parties and, deal with a whole bunch of other stuff, which adds overhead and, takes a cut out of everyone's profit, right? So the rate of return will probably be a little bit higher to compensate for that. The investor and the entrepreneur, if they decide they want to work together, they don't even need to use like Proton Mail or another messaging system like Signal. I mean, they could, But ultimately, they could actually correspond privately through the Zano blockchain itself using the private messaging system, because you actually can send messages through the Zano blockchain. And it's cool because the alias, again, is associated already with their wallet. And it's also associated basically with where they receive messages. So, you still have to pay a fee. Basically, you have to pay 0.01 Zeno, I believe, is the fee per transaction, which right now is something like 6 cents. So you'd have to pay a little bit to send those private messages, but it's convenient, right? And you know who you're talking to because you connected on your pages, and those pages exhibit those aliases, and those aliases are already tied to all the information about you. So it's kind of convenient just to use the Zeno blockchain to message. Although I don't know what the cap is on how much you can include in a Zeno message. There probably is a cap, but I guess you can send multiple messages. But um, okay. And then once an investor determines they want to invest, either they will purchase the stock tokens directly from the entrepreneur, or they will purchase them in the open market. Okay. And if you remember our idea from the other video about the issuance of stock tokens, I don't have my Zeno thing up at the moment, but just to run through that idea again. So an entrepreneur building a business who wants to raise capital through stock tokens, what they would do is they would create a token, and it would be basically the name of their business. And they would have a ticker that would kind of like be associated with their name. And they would have, uh, you know, however many tokens, they would have a max supply, and, they would issue the token. Now, all the information regarding these tokens are public. Um, so let me see if, because I looked this up recently, or I asked somebody in the chat on the Telegram. So yeah, you can go to explore.zano.org. I don't know if you all can see that, explorerzano.org. Um, and you can see all the confidential assets which have been made. And there's 376 total assets. But effectively, what an investor could do, just to make sure that they understand what kind of tokens they're buying and what they're getting themselves into, they can go on this website to see the token that is issued, and they can see. Hold on, I got to take the whitelisted thing off. Okay, they can see. You're not going to be able to see this, but you can see the total max supply, which can't change once it's issued. So it's not like they can dilute the shares of their stock tokens on you. You can see the current supply. So if the current supply is nowhere near the max supply, you got to be careful, because if you buy, that token, early on, they issue more, then that may, dilute the value of the token. You got the name, you got the ticker, and you can see when it was created, which is also very effective, because if somebody tries to copy your token or something, and try to issue that as like a fraudulent version of your stock token, then you can check that token and see when the created date of that was. Okay, and if it is very recent, then you can be concerned that that's not the right token. And by the way, each of these tokens have a special asset ID. Okay, and so that would be given to the prospective investor to make sure that they're getting into the right token. Okay, so yeah, you got decimal points and all that kind of stuff, and you can see when it's updated as well, which is kind of cool. And each token has a meta area that can be changed in real time by the person who issued the token. So if this person issuing the token wants to, provide some information to the people who hold those tokens, they can update the meta box. I wish I had my confidential asset thing up. They could update a box on there that kind of sends a message to everyone holding the token, and maybe they could, through that, tell those people when the next dividend date is. But there'd probably be like a telegram, or there'd probably be some way for these entrepreneurs who are issuing these dividends to let the investors know that, hey, a dividend's coming up, we have to get ready for that. And I'll tell you in a minute how they issue the dividend, get that taken care of. But they can do that um, to look up the token and kind of do research on the value of the token and all that kind of stuff. Even though what this entrepreneur could do is um, they could issue another suite of tokens if they need to raise more capital. So, kind of like where you have different rounds of capital raising for businesses, you could have like tier A as the first coin, then tier B as the second coin, and like each tier would maybe have different dividend rates. I mean, all this stuff could be worked out in the capital markets out there. Um, so the way that this would work is, let's say that this investor wants to buy into the company and other investors want to buy into the company as well. They all get their stock tokens. And whether that's through purchasing it through the entrepreneur or whether that's through, purchasing these in the open market on Zano Trade. And if you don't know what Zano Trade is, it's basically a peer-to-peer market where people can trade their confidential assets and their decentralized tokens that they make. Whether they purchase them through there. Okay. So let's say now that they want to um, uh, get their dividend. Maybe the company's been open for half a year or a year and the company's doing well. They have profits and presumably they're issuing financial statements to their page on the Zano Tank or through some private Telegram chat or through some Dread account or Reddit or wherever. Like they're posting this information. And if they have profits, then they want to issue some of that equity out in the form of dividends. Okay. So does how are the dividends issued? So what would happen is the investors would get a notification from the entrepreneur one way or another. They would send out some kind of shout out on their Reddit page or their Telegram, or in one way or another, they'd update that meta box I was telling you about earlier. Hey, there's a dividend coming. And what the investors would then do is they would open an escrow contract with the issuer of the token, with the business. And that escrow contract would have as their collateral the number of stock tokens for that business that they have. Okay. And the cool thing about Zano wallets is that the address of your Zano wallet, your alias, is the same for your Zano wallet, for your other confidential assets. Okay. So they're all one. So if you create an escrow contract with the issuer of the token, um, then what they could do is they could pay you your Zano dividend knowing that that wallet has a proof of reserves of the stock token in it, right? That would be the whole purpose of the escrow contract is you open up the contract just to prove you have those tokens. And these contracts would stay open for 7 days, for a week during the dividend issuance period, right? And they'd want to stay open for that period just to make sure that everybody has a chance to open that contract. And you wouldn't want to pay it out as the contract's open in case, what somebody does is they get that dividend, they close out the contract, send that stock token to another wallet, and then they open up another contract and then try to get a double dividend, right? That wouldn't be great. And so all of these contracts would stay open for a certain period of time. And then at a certain point, when the time is up to open up those contracts, um, the issuer then pays the dividend to everybody that has a contract open with him. Okay. And then you cancel the contract. And just to make sure that the contract isn't accepted by the issuer, because the whole point isn't to necessarily actually, have a contract for this dividend. It's just to prove reserves, right? So maybe as collateral, you put like a ton of money that the issuer would have to put up, right, in order to open the contract so that, if some weird funny business goes on, they would definitely pay the price for it. Because if contracts don't go through, or if there is some kind of dispute that can't be, figured out by the parties when they open these escrow contracts, the amounts that are put up as collateral get burned, right? So that's something that you could do to protect yourself. But that's effectively how the stock issuance and how the dividends would be paid. Okay. So this is my idea, and it just doesn't have to be stock used for raising capital. It could be bonds, right? And we talked about that in the other video as well, where these entrepreneurs, they issue a bond directly to somebody, in order to raise capital. And in that meta information section, they just update how many payments are left, what the yield on the bond is, and they can pay out the principal and interest over time. And it's the same kind of situation where they let those people know when the next bond payment is. And so that bond can trade on the open market. And whoever has that bond opens up this escrow contract. And then that person knows when that bond payment has to be made, that, hey, whoever opens up this contract with me and has my token asset, I pay them the principal and interest in the form of Zano, right? And then they update that meta box again to say, hey, instead of there being 10 payments now, there are 9 payments left. And so when it trades on the open market, somebody doesn't think that they're getting a bond with 10 payments left, but 9 payments left, and the market value updates accordingly. So that's a way that could be done. So there's more to say about this. And I'm sure people have their own ideas as to how this could be, uh, kind of tinkered with and made better. But this is just an idea I have for entrepreneurs and investors who are interested in Zano to come together. And it's a way for capital to be issued and raised and all that stuff. So that's all I've got for you. That's the Zano Tank. Build with Zano hashtag. That's my contribution. And yeah, let me know if you have questions or contributions to the conversation on this. I'm interested to see what other people think, and that's what I got. So, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for listening to me, and um, yeah, see you guys in the next vid. See you.